My stepsister mistreated me for 18 years. Now she lost her apartment with 4 kids. She sued me for not letting her live in my house. I bought with years of savings. But the judge destroyed her in court, and she never saw coming what I did. I'm 25 years old. I work in office administration. And honestly, I need to tell this story because I still can't believe all of this actually happened. My stepsister basically sued me. Yes, she took me to court because I wouldn't let her live in my house. The house that I bought with my money after years of working and saving. But for this to make sense, I need to go back pretty far. Like when I was 7 years old and my mom married Tiffany's dad. I remember that day perfectly. I mean, I was 7 years old, so obviously I didn't understand the whole blended family concept and all that stuff, but I was excited because I was going to have an older sister. Tiffany was 8 years old at the time, and I thought we were going to be like best friends. You know, that we were going to share clothes and secrets and all those things you see in movies. Boy, was I wrong. Literally, from day one, Tiffany made it super clear that I wasn't her sister, that I was never going to be her sister, and that basically my existence annoyed her. I'm not exaggerating when I say it was years of constant bullying, like every day it was something new. She would hide my things, tell other kids at school that I was weird or that I smelled bad, which obviously wasn't true. And if I tried to approach her when there were visitors or extended family, she would completely ignore me or say hurtful things to me in front of everyone. The thing is that my mom and her dad tried to make things work. I guess they thought that over time Tiffany would get used to the situation, but it never happened. My stepdad. Let me clarify that he was always pretty decent to me at first. Like he treated me well and everything. But he also didn't say anything strong to Tiffany when she treated me badly. It was like everyone expected me to just put up with it, because I was the younger one and because, I don't know, I guess they thought eventually she would change. Spoiler alert, she didn't change. It was years like that, literally years, of feeling like an intruder in my own home. Tiffany did everything possible to remind me that I wasn't really part of her family, that she had her dad and I was just the daughter of the woman who had married him. When Tiffany turned 13, she decided she wanted to go live with her biological mom full-time. Honestly, it was a relief for me. I no longer had to deal with her hurtful comments every day or the constant tension in the house. My mom was sad because she wanted the family to work, but I remember thinking that I was finally going to be able to breathe. You know what I mean? I wasn't going to have to walk on eggshells in my own house anymore, or worry about whether Tiffany was going to ruin something of mine or say something mean to me in front of my stepdad. For a while, things were good, like we lived our life without her, and honestly, I hardly thought about Tiffany. We would see her occasionally at family gatherings and birthdays, but she basically ignored me and I did the same. Then, when Tiffany was 16, she got pregnant. My mom told me one day after school, and I remember being surprised but also not that surprised. I don't know if that makes sense. Tiffany had always been kind of impulsive and did what she wanted without thinking about the consequences. The baby's father disappeared almost immediately. Typical. And Tiffany needed a place to stay, so she ended up back at my mom and stepdad's house. I was like 15 years old at the time, and honestly, I wasn't excited about the situation, but, well, what could I do? What had bothered me a lot was that when the baby was born, a beautiful girl, by the way, Tiffany literally wouldn't even let me get close. If I walked into a room where she was with the baby, she would tell me to leave. If I tried to ask her something about the baby, she would completely ignore me or say something rude, like it wasn't my business. My mom tried to smooth things over, saying that Tiffany was stressed and that being a young mom was hard. And yes, I understood that. But it also didn't justify her treating me like garbage. You know? Either way, I was already used to Tiffany hating me, so I just backed off and got on with my life. I finished high school, went to college to study administration, started working part-time at an office. I focused on me and building my life because obviously I didn't have any kind of relationship with Tiffany, nor was I going to have one. During those following years, Tiffany had 3 more kids with different dads, none of whom stuck around, and basically went back and forth from my parents' house depending on her financial situation. I had already moved to my own apartment when I was like 20 years old. I was working full-time and saving to buy a house. Fast forward to when I was 23 years old. After years of saving every penny I could, I managed to buy my own house. It wasn't a mansion or anything like that. It was a modest 2-bedroom house in a decent neighborhood, but it was mine, completely paid off. Because I had used all my savings plus a small loan that I was paying off responsibly, I was so proud of myself. Like I had worked super hard for this, and finally I had my own space, where no one was going to make me feel bad or unwanted. My mom and stepdad came to see the house when I moved in, and they were happy for me. Although I could see in my mom's eyes that look she has when she wants to say something but doesn't dare. Anyway, I settled in, decorated everything the way I wanted, and basically was living my best life being an independent adult. For the next 2 years, I had minimal contact with Tiffany. I knew from my mom that she was still struggling financially, that the fathers of her children didn't pay child support or disappeared, that she couldn't hold down a stable job. Honestly, I felt some pity for the kids because it wasn't their fault having an irresponsible mom, but it wasn't my problem or my responsibility to fix it. I would send gifts for my younger half-siblings, the 2 kids that my mom and stepdad had had together and with whom I did have a good relationship, but I had no connection with Tiffany's kids because she had never let me be part of their lives. About 6 months ago, everything exploded. I got a call from my mom on a Sunday afternoon. I was at my house watching a movie, super relaxed, and from the tone of her voice, I knew immediately that something was wrong. She told me that Tiffany had lost her job, again, and that she hadn't been able to pay rent on her apartment, so she had been evicted. Tiffany and her 4 kids, who at that time were between 9 and 3 years old, I think, had moved into my parents' house temporarily. The problem was that my parents' house wasn't very big. Like, it had 3 bedrooms, and with my 2 younger half-siblings plus Tiffany and her 4 kids, it was completely packed. My mom started beating around the bush and finally asked me if Tiffany and the kids could stay with me for a while she got back on her feet, financially. I was silent for a moment because I literally couldn't believe what I was hearing. I asked my mom if she was serious, like if she really expected me to open the doors of my house to the person who had made my life miserable for years, who had treated me like garbage, who had never wanted anything to do with me. My mom started with the whole thing about how we're family, that Tiffany was going through a hard time, that the kids weren't to blame. All those things that I understood in theory, but that didn't change the fact that Tiffany had never considered me family, and now suddenly I had to act like we were close sisters. I told my mom no, that I was sorry, but I wasn't going to do that. She was silent and then said she understood, but to think about it, that it was important to help family in difficult times. I thought that was the end of it, but oh no. 2 days later, I got a call directly from Tiffany. Seriously, in all these years, she had almost never called me. I think I could count on one hand the phone conversations we had had, and now suddenly she was calling me. I answered because I was curious to hear what she had to say. There were no greetings or anything. It went straight to the point. She told me she needed a place to stay, and that my mom had told her I had space in my house. I told her yes, I had space, but it wasn't available for her. Then Tiffany, and I swear this happened exactly like this, told me that I should move out of my house temporarily so that she and her kids could live there. Can you believe it? She was literally asking me to leave my own house, the house I bought with my money after years of working and saving, so she could live there comfortably with her 4 kids. I told her she was completely crazy if she thought I was going to do that. Tiffany started yelling, saying I was selfish. How could I be so cruel when she was in a desperate situation that her kids needed a roof over their heads? I responded, and yes, I probably sounded harsh, but I was already fed up. That for years she had made it super clear to me that I wasn't her family, that she had treated me horribly, that she had never even let me get close to her kids, and that now that she needed me suddenly I had to forget all that and help her. I told her it wasn't my responsibility to solve her problems and that she needed to find another solution. Tiffany kept yelling, saying I had always been a selfish bitch, that my mom should be ashamed of me, that I was a bad person. I hung up the phone because I wasn't going to keep listening to that. For the next few weeks, my mom would call me every 2 or 3 days trying to convince me to reconsider. My stepdad also called me a couple of times, which surprised me because, like I said, he had been decent to me when we were younger, but now he was completely on Tiffany's side. He was telling me that she was his daughter and that I had the ability to help her but was choosing not to. I reminded him that Tiffany had chosen to treat me like garbage for years and that I was also choosing to protect my peace of mind and my space. The conversations always ended badly, and I started to feel like I was going crazy, like everyone was making me feel like the bad guy when I hadn't done anything wrong. One Saturday afternoon, I think like 3 weeks after that call with Tiffany, I heard a knock on the door. I opened it and there was Tiffany with her 4 kids and a bunch of suitcases and boxes. They had literally shown up unannounced, expecting me to let them in. The kids looked tired and confused, and honestly it hurt me to see them like that because it wasn't their fault. But I also couldn't let Tiffany manipulate the situation using her kids. Tiffany told me, like she didn't even ask, She just said, "We came to stay. Help us with the things." I stood in the doorway without moving and told her they weren't coming in, that they needed to leave. Tiffany started making a scene, saying how, could I be so cruel, that I was leaving kids on the street? What kind of person was I? I told her as calmly as I could that she had options, that she could stay with my parents, that she could look for a temporary shelter, that she could contact social services, but that my house was not one of her options. Tiffany looked at me with so much hatred, like I had never seen anyone look at me like that, and told me I was going to regret this, that this wasn't going to end like this, that I was going to pay for being so selfish. She grabbed her kids and her stuff and left. I stood there shaking because the confrontation had affected me more than I wanted to admit, but I also knew I had done the right thing. I couldn't let Tiffany just enter my life like that. After years of treating me badly, just because now she needed me. What happened next was even crazier. Tiffany started calling all the extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, even grandparents I barely saw, telling them her version of the story where I was this horrible, heartless person who was leaving her sister and her nephews homeless when I had a big house with empty rooms, which wasn't even true because my house had only 2 bedrooms, and I used one as an office to work from home. I started getting messages and calls from relatives I barely knew, telling me I should help Tiffany, that family helps each other, that I was young and without kids, so I could temporarily move to a smaller apartment. No one, literally no one, asked me my version of the story, or seemed to care that Tiffany had treated me horribly for years. I blocked several relatives on my phone and social media because I couldn't deal with the constant stress of being judged when they didn't know the whole story. My mom kept calling me trying to mediate, but I could hear in her voice that she also thought I should give in. My younger half-siblings, who were like 12 and 10 years old, sent me messages saying they missed me, but that the house was very crowded and noisy with all of Tiffany's kids there, and that broke my heart because they weren't to blame for any of this either. Then, and this is where things got truly ridiculous. Like 2 months after all this drama, I received some legal papers. Tiffany was suing me. Yes, suing me. Arguing that since we were sisters and I had a house with available rooms and she was in an emergency situation with minor children, I had some kind of legal obligation to provide them with housing. When I read those papers, I honestly laughed because it was so absurd it couldn't be real. But then I realized it was real and that I was going to have to go to court and deal with this officially. I hired a lawyer, which cost me money I didn't want to spend, and he assured me that Tiffany's case had no legal basis. He explained to me that unless there was a contract or prior agreement, no one can force another person to provide housing, not even family. I felt a little better, but I was still stressed because I had to go to court and face Tiffany and my parents, who obviously were going to be on her side. The day of the hearing came about 3 weeks later. I walked into the courtroom and there were Tiffany, my mom, my stepdad, and incredibly some relatives that I guess Tiffany had brought to apply pressure or show support. They all looked at me when I walked in and I sat down with my lawyer on the other side of the room. Tiffany presented her case, basically repeating everything she had already said, that she and her kids were in crisis, that I had space in my house, that we were family, and I had a moral and, according to her, legal obligation to help her. She even cried a little, talking about her kids and how hard it was for her. And yes, it probably was hard, but that didn't mean I had to solve her problems. My lawyer was super clear and professional. He explained that there was no law that obligated a citizen to provide housing to an adult family member capable of working, that I had bought my house with my own money and had every right to decide who lived there, and that Tiffany's situation, although unfortunate, did not create any legal obligation on my part. He also mentioned, and this was important, the history of the relationship between Tiffany and me, how she had treated me for years, and how she had only contacted me when she needed something from me. The judge listened to everything and basically said the case was ridiculous and had no legal merit. He said something like, he understood it was a difficult family situation, but that the court could not and would not force anyone to open their home to another person against their will. He dismissed the case immediately. Tiffany started to protest, and the judge had to ask her to calm down, or he was going to have to ask her to leave the courtroom. I felt vindicated but also exhausted, like I had technically won, but I still had to go through this whole horrible process. After the hearing, Tiffany didn't even look at me. She just left the room with my mom and stepdad behind her. Some of the relatives who had come looked at me with disapproval, but others seemed a bit embarrassed. I guess they were finally realizing that maybe they hadn't heard the whole story. I didn't say anything to any of them. I just left with my lawyer, thanked him for his work, and went home. It's been about 4 months since the hearing, and I haven't heard anything from Tiffany. My mom calls me occasionally, but the conversations are tense and we avoid talking about this whole situation. She told me that Tiffany eventually found a subsidized apartment and that things are better, which I'm glad about for the kids, but it doesn't change anything about what happened. My younger half-siblings visit me sometimes, and that's the only good thing that's come out of all this, being able to spend time with them without all the tension and drama. The truth is, I don't know if I did the right or wrong thing. I guess it depends on who, you ask. There are days when I feel guilty thinking about those kids and how hard it must be for them. But then I remember that I'm not responsible for Tiffany's decisions or the consequences of those decisions. I also remember all the years of mistreatment and rejection, and I realize that I don't owe anything to someone who never treated me like family until she needed something from me. I'm still living in my house, working, paying my bills, and trying to rebuild the family relationships I can maintain, but I don't regret setting boundaries. Sometimes setting boundaries makes you look like the bad person, but that doesn't mean you're wrong.